Hello, this is Paul Tunner from Farmer Forum. Welcome to another live webinar. Today's topic is improving commercial decisions with customer relationship network insights. Sounds intriguing. I'll say a little bit more in a moment about what that's all about, but you'll hear a lot from our experts who are with me today. And today's webinar is sponsored by Zephyr Health. I'm very pleased to have with me on this webinar Leilani Latimer, VP of Global Marketing, Partnerships and Commercial Operations at Zephyr Health, and also Megan O, Senior Product Manager from Abbott Structural Heart, who will be talking about her experience in this field. As usual with these webinars, we're going to have a sort of structure where we have presentations from each of my guest participants, but we want to hear your questions. So we'll have a good second half of the webinar answering those questions, having a good debate. You can ask whatever you like. We're not going to call out names of who's asking stuff. It can be anonymous. We will also have some polls to get you to think about, quick multiple choice polls, and I'll activate the first of those shortly. And as usual, you can follow on Twitter if you're on Twitter. Hashtag #PPWebinar is the hashtag to use. You can throw in questions via Twitter, you can make observations, so you have multiple routes to get involved. There's really no excuse. And just by way of a brief prelude to today's topic, what we're going to hone in on today is understanding these customer relationships and these customer networks. We know that relationships are very important in sales, in any industry, not just life sciences, and that's always been the case. But what we're drilling into here is not just the relationship between the commercial teams and the customer, but actually those critically important relationships between customers and understanding who is making the real decisions within those networks. Sounds pretty complicated, but actually we're now at a stage with technology we can start to look at some of this stuff. So before I hand over to our first speaker, Leilani, I want to kick things off with a poll, get you involved, multiple choice poll. We can't see how you're voting, so it is anonymous. And the first question we want to ask you, for those listening in, is to what extent do you believe the behaviour of healthcare professionals or healthcare organisations is influenced by their relationship with other healthcare professionals and healthcare organisations? You can say not at all, slightly, moderately, very, or extremely, depending on what you feel. So vote away on that in the background. We'll come back and take a look at that a little bit later on. Without further ado, I will hand over to Leilani as our first speaker. Welcome, Leilani, and over to you to give us a bit of background.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Paul, and greetings, everyone. And I like to say for marketers, it's now much more about who you know than what you know. So let me share a little bit about our view on how customer relationship network insights are shaping and improving commercial strategies and decisions. So I like to call this the marketing age of enlightenment. Never like now have we had so much data at our fingertips, but for marketers, the problem isn't about getting the data. It's about connecting the data and doing something meaningful with it. Today, we want to view, track, and understand our customers' journey across digital and personal channels. But according to a recent survey, brands are only able to see about 20% of their entire customer ecosystem. So in order to truly put the customer at the heart of a marketing strategy, we have to be able to deliver messages to customer segments and audience segments that are tailored to their known interests and their channel device preferences. As marketers, we are still struggling to implement data-driven segmentation and personalization. In fact, 56% of in-house marketers say they need to get better at segmentation. And luckily, something that's a core competency for us here at Zephyr Health, one of the key differentiators to getting this data and connecting it and getting those personalized insights that we need is going to be artificial intelligence or machine learning. In fact, marketing research firm Persado says that over half of UK and US marketers are not able to identify learnings from past campaigns. That's one of their primary challenges. And 86% of them said they're actually going to be investing in artificial intelligence or machine learning solutions in this upcoming year. So what exactly do we mean by customer relationship networks, and how does this relate directly to life sciences? What we're talking about specifically is how a company's target customer is connected to other potential customers and how these relationships influence their decision making. In life sciences companies, these relationship networks can include things like referring physicians, integrated delivery networks, shared patients, healthcare organizations, medical school colleagues, co-authors on publications, or co-researchers, just to name a few. So we recently launched a survey across about 110 life sciences executives to ask them, are they using customer relationship networks in their go-to-market programs and how valuable they are to them? And overwhelmingly, the respondents agreed that the behavior of their customers with regards to prescribing a treatment is heavily influenced by their relationships with other healthcare professionals or organizations.
As I watched the poll, that seems to be a trend we're reflecting in how you're voting. But feel free to keep casting your votes and let us know what you think.
Great. So while 71% of those surveyed said yes, the importance of these relationships is key, less than 30% are actually using these insights to understand customer influence and drive their commercial strategies on a regular basis. So the opportunity to expand customer network mapping beyond what is truly an analog view today, and by analog I mean mostly coming from field-facing personnel sharing direct customer insights. So the survey pointed to these areas as the top 3 areas of interest for using digital insights to better understand and influence customers. So identifying early adopters, tracking treatment guideline decision makers, and identifying high-volume physicians upstream. Referring physicians, excuse me. But clearly we have quite a way to go as far as getting these insights, and most of, again, those people surveyed said they're still not able to collect or analyze these core and determining data points that would give them what they need to shape their go-to-market programs. You can imagine how valuable these digital data inputs are when they're combined with other key customer profile elements, and how these will help transform a go-to-market strategy. The areas that the respondents did say they are using and analyzing data around customer relationship networks today are still available. I'll tell you which ones those are, but all of the respondents said they're doing this on a manual basis. So those are primarily clinical trial co-participation, publication co-authorship, and common hospital roles or connections. But again, they're doing that manually, not through any kind of automated fashion. So why, would you would ask, and again, what did the respondents in the survey say as far as what their biggest challenges were to getting digital or automated access to these vast elements of data that can trace the customer relationship networks? And primarily they said cost, availability of the data, and time or complexity in implementing systems that can help them get the data and get the insights. So really, as we think about the key takeaways from this survey, and again, we'll share the link to the full survey report for those who are interested in downloading it at the end of the webinar, but the key takeaways were that leveraging customer relationship network insights is critical as a go-to-market differentiator for your brand initiatives. Clearly, marketers need to go beyond really what are current analog approaches and embrace digital analytics. And I have a comment around that in a moment. And finally, again, the integrated data that underpins and unlocks the power of customer relationship networks is core. On that second point, when we talk about marketers needing to go beyond the analog approach and embrace digital analytics, I think a lot of what we see with our customers is they've been able to digitize what I would call analog data points, but that is not the same thing as digitalizing, which is truly finding a way to integrate diverse and very disconnected data sources, which Megan's going to talk a little bit about as well. But the ability to actually do that and take a completely different approach to looking at then what kind of insights you can pull from that. And those are areas where here at Zephyr Health we are keenly focused on helping our customers get to that next stage, not just in, again, getting the data put together, but getting the insights that can truly shape a much higher value go-to-market program. And with that, I will turn it over back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Leilani. I mean, this is obviously just a very brief snapshot of this broader survey and some of the information. And as you mentioned, there's a link, if you click on the attachments and links when you're viewing this, There is a link to where you can download that survey. It's definitely worth checking out in more detail. And there's a few interesting points that I think leap out there that I'm sure we'll discuss in more detail. I guess one point that may be worth just elaborating on, Leilani, before I hand over to Megan, is this, what we describe as the current analog approach. Can you just say a little bit more about what that is and where companies are very often?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, if we think back 15, 20 years, so many steps have been taken and positive steps have been taken in getting a digital recording, if you will, of the customer interaction. And these are primarily tracked today through some very, very successful customer relationship management applications. So the field force, whether it's medical field force or whether it's the commercial field force today, are tracking their customer interactions. And they're also tracking customer preferences. Does the customer want to be contacted via a digital channel versus a non-digital channel? So again, a personal, but this is very much a one direction, if you will, or a single-faceted view of that customer interaction. Being able to understand how that customer then interacts with other customers, being able to get information on, again, shared patients or a shared referring network is a much more multifaceted view of the customer that for marketing and sales teams is core in how they build out these much more highly personalized go-to-market programs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point that's just worth holding in mind, because to follow on what you're describing there, it's not that we don't necessarily understand some of the customer relationships. The reps very often do understand some aspects of them, but what they're missing could be what's damaging their ability to engage within those networks.
Absolutely, and I can give you, a great example. Imagine that you're able to pull a cohort. When we talk about data-driven segmentation, you've run a very successful marketing program, possibly a non-personal promotion program that, again, a group of customers have responded positively to. They opened it, they engaged with it, they downloaded, etc. And now if you could pull a cohort of customers that look like those customers based on some attributes. So again, 10 physicians engaged positively with a digital program, as an example, and now I'm able to pull another cohort of 20, 25 customers that look like those customers based upon, again, these very sophisticated attributes. I can now send that same program to them, or again, personalize it, change it, tailor it to their needs, and send it out and get higher response rates, better response rates. And that, again, that's just a very simple example of running something like a non-personal promotion to a very data-driven cohort or segment of customers.
Yeah, so small differences, but it makes a big difference in the grand scheme of things. Okay, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, and discuss in more detail. Before I hand over to Megan, let's just take a look at that first poll. It is very much a straw poll. We tend to find, certainly in the first part of the webinars, people are a little bit reluctant to vote. I promise you, we're not going to call out how you're voting. It is anonymous. You can vote however you want. But what is interesting, and I guess perhaps not surprising, given what we've seen in the survey, is that most of you seem to think it's pretty important that the relationships between HCPs and HCOs are influencing what they're doing. So 33% moderately, 50% very, 16% extremely. Nobody has voted for not at all or slightly. I guess we're not particularly surprised by that. Let me start another poll before I hand over to Megan. So this question, and again, one to think about as you're listening to the next presentation. So we understand that relationships are important. This next question links into something that we asked within the survey. To what extent are you analysing and using insights from customer networks? So having the data is one thing, how you're analysing it and using it is something else. So your options here are never, around a quarter of the time, 25% of the time, half the time, 50%, three-quarters of the time, 75%, or always. Be very honest. As I say, we're not going to call out how people are voting. Or if you're sat within an organisation, maybe a service organisation, and it doesn't apply to you, think about from the perspective of your client how it would apply to them. And we'll come back and take a look at that, see how it's panning out. But I'm going to hand over at this point. Megan, you've been very patient in the background. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to you to talk us through what your experience has been in understanding these customer relationships and networks and how it's shaping what you're doing within your business.
Yep. Thank you so much, Paul. My name is Megan O. I'm with Abbott Structural Heart. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my experience. It's been a great experience, and I like to share as much positive experience much as I can with the industry folks so that we could all grow as a whole. Today I would like to just share how we have improved our commercial decisions with utilizing the customer relationship network insight, really focused on the referral pathway. I will go over what our challenges were and how we are now overcoming to find solutions to make better decisions for our sales team to increase their business by utilizing the data analytics that we're offering them. So we have a device that was approved by FDA back in October of 2013, so it's been about 4 years, and we're the only player in the market with transcatheter mitral regurgitation repair. As you can see, if you've been in this industry, life science industry long enough, you kind of understand how big the structural heart therapies become. And as you see that the small r is really for the repair, and then there's a big sleuth of companies out there who is getting into market for the replacement as well. The device is used by a structural heart team. They're also called multidisciplinary team or the heart team, which makes up from intervention cardiologist and a cardiac surgeon. And in our world, it also includes the echocardiographers. There's about 5,000 hospitals in U.S., and for now, there's a very small number of hospitals, also known as Center of Excellence, who are treating patients for structural heart therapies. So today,
without going into the sorry, Megan, without going into
Sure.
the details, I mean, I guess the bottom line is this is potentially quite a serious condition if it's not treated effectively.
Correct. So if you have heard TAVR, which is a transcatheter aortic valve repair, they could die pretty fast. Mitral regurgitation is a little bit more of a slow progressing disease, but once it gets sort of to a stage of a severe, it could progress pretty fast, and over 50% of the patients actually will end up dying.
Right.
Okay. So today the gold standard is really the surgery, but there are many, many patients who are there who are being managed, medically managed, who's not being very effective. So just to give you some perspective, there's over 4 million MR patients with only 1.5% being treated today. I think I've seen up to 5 million for the MR patients in the national podium in the last year or so. We currently have probably about 300,000 referring physicians that we know of. We do know that there are other primary care physicians that we have not actually touched, or we don't have enough data to actually populate into our database to really confirm the total number of the referring physicians. But if you look, we only have access, there's only 300 sites that have access to the therapy, and we only have 100 reps out there in the field actually helping the physicians treat these patients. So with so many patients out there and a whole lot of referring physicians, it's really hard for our people to actually figure out what the priorities are and how to target most efficient or optimal physicians.
Yeah, I think that illustrates the scale of the challenge quite nicely, doesn't it? 100 reps and over 300,000 referring physicians. You're either going to have incredibly busy reps, or you've got to be quite smart in who you go and speak to.
Exactly. So other challenge that we have is we really don't know who these indirect customers are. I'm referring to the referring physicians that makes up primary care physicians, the clinical cardiologist, and heart failure specialist. So it took us a very long time to really figure out who these people are. So the profile that we have is they don't treat, they manage. But what they do have is that they have power to understand and actually refer for treatment. And the conduit, how do we get to these people, is very limited, as you saw the number in the prior slide. It's our sales team. And they also have a very limited access to who these people are, because these are not our normal selling customers. We also have a lot of purchase data that is all over the place. As you know, at life science companies, I can't speak for everybody, for I know that we have not been very good at following the technology. We feel like we're at the tail end of the technology. We're doing a lot of things manually. Very old selling. It's based on relationship. So we never really invest a whole lot of money to really utilize the technology to analyze our customers.
I think if I can say anything reassuring at that point, Megan, I think everybody I speak to in life sciences feels they're some way behind the curve. I've never heard anybody say, oh yeah, we're ahead of the curve. So it may just be your perception. I'm sure you're doing some pretty cool stuff.
Well, I live in Silicon Valley where my spouse is in a tech business, and when he sees some of the stuff that we do, he doesn't understand why we're like 30 years behind, right? So it is interesting. So why does it matter for us even more so is it's not just the MR patients that we actually treat. We have other portfolios in the pipeline that includes treating patients with aortic disease. And I know if you've been in this industry, how big the TAVR market's been. But if you really look at it, there's so many patients. They're just barely touching those patients. We're looking at 14% being treated today. As you know, there's also a big talk about tricuspid patients, and there's quite a few out there, and it's a very small number is being treated. Not even 1% of tricuspid patients are being treated today. And you saw the MR patients earlier from my earlier slide. Market development is super tough, right? It's lack of awareness from the referring physicians. They don't really understand the disease incompleteness. They don't understand the indication along with the morphology of the disease, and they don't understand the treatment options. Why? Because they practice in guidelines and they're not always confident that they have the right guidelines. So if you're not attending every conference every year, you get behind. You think you know what the guidelines are, but the guidelines are changing almost every year today to how to treat these valvular disease patients. They also don't understand when to refer because they don't understand the patient profile. They don't understand when their patient comes in, they open the door, they stop, they start to breathe, and then they walk over to the receptionist. For them, that's just they're either just old, and because they're just not, the symptom is not severe, that they don't think that they need to refer for additional treatment, or simply they just don't know what's out there. And there's also an unwillingness to refer. Maybe they had a bad experience with the implanting centers, or access to care. As you saw, there are over 5,000 hospitals in U.S., but only 300 to 450 Center of Excellence who treat this structural heart therapy. So if you live in somewhere in Montana, you may not be able to go somewhere that is, within a couple hours. You're looking at most likely traveling probably on plane to get treated. And lack of urgencies to refer. They just don't know when to refer because when they do all the diagnostics, it's not as clear like TAVR that for mitral regurgitation patient that is clear when to refer. So how do we optimize the targeting referring physicians? So we could do it the old way, which is cold call, which is not very effective. And by the way, we've tried this, and it wasn't very effective. So we start to do some target segmentation. And we weren't sure where to start, so based on the prescription data, we signed them a decile, and we decided to go to that route. But the amount of the physicians that were out there was just too big. So as you know, there's a lot of data out there. There's too much data out there. And the complexity of data, trying to put these data and marry them up to make sure you're getting the efficient targeting list, it's really hard. And especially, we are not in the business of doing the data analytics here. Our job is to really provide a device that's going to help treat patients.
And I'm
And the
guessing
biggest
that's,
thing, go ahead.
sorry, Megan, I was going to say, I'm guessing that's one of the challenges when people look at this, because you're right, there is so much data out there. It's quite daunting. The temptation is probably to look at it and go, well, this is too hard to do anything with, so we'll just keep doing what we're doing.
Right. So the biggest thing is data adoption from sales team. I had an opportunity to go out in the field about a year, and it is tough because at the end of the day, if the tool is not user-friendly and I have to do extra work to get to the data that I need to get to, you just kind of walk away from it, and it's hard for them to adapt. And at the end of the day, it has to be what's in it for me. How do I use this tool to grow my business? And if the answer is yes, they will adapt easily. And this is sort of something that I want to show you as a case study. So uncomplicate the complicated, right? The paradigm shift in the device world. We used to sell based on relationship, which is still common in some of the device, but for the structural heart therapies, it's becoming more and more of not just relationship selling, but really reaching out to your second-tier customers who are the referring physicians, so you could feed them into the implanting site. And really importance of understanding the referring physician has become much easier for us, as a lot of these data analytics put together has given us some of the profile and who to go after. So I know that probably a majority of your listeners have some sort of CRM system. We actually have Salesforce.com, which is great because now you're just depositing a lot of data. But at the end of the day, we're just depositing a lot of data. So it was tough for the salespeople to use the data that they put in, to use the output, to use it. It's just not as user-friendly for us the way we have set it up. So with the customer relationship network insight tool that we have, we were able to marry up all the database from the Salesforce and additional data that comes from Zephyr. We were able to marry them up and make it user-friendly for our sales team to prioritize and help them not to break the referral pathway relationship. As you know, based on the first poll that Paul just took, how important it is to understand the relations between the physicians to physicians and physician to the HCOs. Because once you attempt to break this relationship, the physicians will walk away from you very easily because they have that relationship they built and a trust, and they will send those patients only to those to implanting site. So what does success look like? At the end of the day, you just want all of these referring physicians to go to the implanting site so that the patients are getting treated with the device that is intended for the therapies. So I don't know if you can really see this, but this is sort of an example of what we use. Is we were able to put multiple data points, put them together, really rank them based on priority of what our needs are. And some of the public data that we're getting from the outside is the podium, the publications, the clinical trial data, to really kind of give us who is going to be our optimal referring physician who will be referring for our device. And you could see here, I know it's really hard to see here, but when our reps actually sign in and click on the customer they're going to go see, it's going to give you everything that they need to know so they could be relevant to the referring physicians. It is super important to really understand, and I always give my rep, when I do a training, I tell them this is like online dating. Before you go see the referring physicians, you get to kind of see who they are, what they look like. By the way, they never really look like what you see on the picture here. Because
it's a bit like online dating then.
It is very much like online dating. So you know the topics they wrote about, the topics they spoke. They know exactly where they have affiliation, so that they know where they're going to refer. So you could have the conversation and kind of provide the data of the implanting site experience that they have so that you could ensure them that they're sending the patients to the right place. Okay? So one of the experience that I had was I was out in the field, as I mentioned earlier. I went to see a physician who was on my top priority list. I was done with having a meeting with that physician. I sat in my car, got my iPad out, very easily just zooming into the location where I was in. It gave me 5 to 6 physicians that was a potential. They weren't high potentials, but they were somewhat at a medium potential customer. Since I was already there, I went to see one of the physicians. I ended up spending about an hour, and within 4 weeks, I actually had a physician, that particular physician refer patients and got treated with the device. I went back again, more education, again, and it just more touches you make, and it records to the system. It gives you a higher decile, but also tells you all the things that you need to do every time you make a touch with that physician. So he has now become, within 12 months, probably one of our highest referring physicians. Now, would I have found that physician if I didn't have this tool? Probably not, because I had a sales call plan that was already laid out, and he was not part of that list. But because the tool that this provides, I was able to access him. So the key takeaways: adapt to new selling. And, we all want some competitive advantage. Well, I found one for myself and for our sales team. And the other thing that I get questioned a lot is what is the ROI? How do you measure this? What does your metrics look like? You have to have a clear expectation. The referring metrics is super tough to measure, because the sales process of the referring physician is much longer than what you're used to seeing with your direct customers who buys from you. You do need to collect data. You need to have some sort of historical data that's going to help you measure that metrics, and it's going to evolve. Your metrics going to evolve based on the algorithm and the behavior that your reps actually provides. I think I've hit a double in this scenario, not a home run, but we're at a place where we are actually rolling it out to all of our sales reps by end of 2017, and we have a second business unit who is ready to adapt, utilizing this tool to really help our sales team make that decision on their sales goal. And now, as I had conversation earlier, is our European colleagues are asking to have a demo so that they could adapt to this particular system. Thank you, Paul.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you, Megan. And your numbers at the end there in terms of where you're going next. I guess you're not going to do those kind of things unless you think it's working. So we'll come back to the ROI question a little bit later. But a couple of things that stand out for me from your presentation, which was fascinating, is this is one example in one particular therapeutic area, one particular indication. But I hope people listening in, even if they're not familiar with that area, can see this is relevant to a number of areas. No company now has more sales and marketing resource than it needs. You have to be quite focused. I think a couple of things that stand out for me, Megan, from what you described is it's about identifying who the kind of champions are within a particular disease area. And that's not the super high-level key opinion leaders. Most people know who those are. Very small number, very obvious, very influential. I guess it's that next tier or two down of people who are exerting significant influence on their peers that might not be so obvious and might get missed by traditional measures. The other thing that struck me, I love this kind of dating analogy. It is partially about identifying who to speak to, but it's then about how you engage with that customer. How can you be relevant by understanding their networks and what's of interest to them? So, fascinating example. I think it does apply in lots and lots of different areas. Leilani, let me come back to you at this point, because to my point there, this is just one example. And we've got some questions coming in, by the way, so thank you. I'll try and get through as many of these as I can. But this is one example of how insights have been used to really great effect within referral networks in this space, in this particular medical device. Can you talk a little bit around how you're seeing this applied in other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's clear that when we talk about what we're calling relationship analytics, the referral network, whether it's provider referral, patient referral, like all of those network relationships are a great use case for this. I'll tell you about two other use cases that our current customers are using today. One is around research networks. So they've really been able to increase customer engagement through tailored messaging to their customers by understanding a provider's publication network and discovering shared interest and common research with co-authors and co-investigators. A second one I'll share is around speaker influence networks. So being able to optimize speaker bureau ROIs by identifying high potential attendees or speakers using data sources like shared patients, similar event attendance patterns, common research or publication networks, and relative distance. So I think that's a data point, Megan brought it up, and it's really, really key that we sometimes don't think about the power of geographic proximity, but frequently it's a data point that really pops when it's combined with another data source. And so again, it's not just, today I'm in this neck of the woods, it's actually looking at how that proximity affects these relationships.
Very interesting. Let's take a look at our second vote, actually. Again, very much a straw poll, but we asked you earlier to what extent you're analysing and using insights from customer networks. And if we look at that, broadly speaking, I think we're more towards the lower end of 50% of the time or less, although we have got some votes for always. Some people have got this right. Maybe those people are sitting within your group, Megan, I don't know. Does that surprise you, that result, Leilani?
No, not at all. I mean, again, I think it really, we're seeing this use case prove out time and time again. And sorry, there is one question around, this is Zephyr Health speaking, and the customer relationship insight tool that Megan was talking about is actually Zephyr Illuminate. That's our platform.
Yeah, I noticed that question come in from the audience, somebody asking what's the name of the manufacturer of this CRM insight tool. Well, the clue is very much in the fact that Zephyr Health is a sponsor of this webinar, so there you go. Let me activate the final vote as we continue our discussion, because I said we'd come back to the ROI question, and we will come back to that. But I want to get your thoughts on this one, all of those of you who are listening in. So the question here is, what length of time is needed to be able to measure return on investment? And the options you've got are 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 to 5 years, or more than 5 years. I'm really interested to see what people come back with on that. While we're voting on that, Megan, back over to yourself. You sort of talked at the end of your presentation around how you see more of a broader rollout of this technology. But what other challenges or other areas are you thinking you might be able to apply this to now?
Yeah, actually, interestingly, I just had a conversation with my colleague, and as Leilani mentioned about the Speakers Bureau, we know who our main KOLs are in our industry today, but we are always looking to develop new KOLs who's up and coming. As for the structural heart, there's less and less of them. It's really difficult to identify them, but with the data point that we have based on the public data that Zephyr actually offers, we are able to really narrow the new up-and-coming who are not just your volume customers, but actually are into writing publications and, getting involved in trials. We're starting to see more and more of that. So we are starting to develop a list of customers who are going to potentially be our next level of KOLs for our disease.
And I guess that means that already these customers are pretty influential, but maybe it means you're also engaging with them slightly earlier than maybe your competitors would who've not identified them as quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think without this data and marrying them together, it's almost impossible to identify these folks.
Yeah, interesting. Now, one of the questions that's come in I want to just touch on is, as with any application like this, you're trying to blend, I guess, experience of the field force with the data analytics approach. So I guess a question for both of you, and Megan, I'm interested in your view on this first. How's this been received by the field force? Have they seen it as something challenging, the way they do things? Have they embraced it? Has there been a bit of communication needed to get them on board with it?
Yeah, so about a month ago, when we announced that we were going to roll this out to our sales force, one of the sales reps called me and said, this is not how I do my business. I don't sell this way. I sell based on my relationship. I know who my customers are. I told him that I will change his mind in the next 2 months. And I've actually had a couple of the reps who told me who just start using it. At the end of the day, any tool that you give them, they think that it's a marketing trying to watch out to see who's performing based on who's using it, who's not utilizing it, just being a big brother. They don't have any data to input into the system. It's all the outputs we give them. All they're doing is receiving and utilizing that data to really make their decisions. So they've become probably this is to be the highest adopted tool that we provided for them.
And why do you think that is? Is that just simply down to they can see clear, tangible results pretty quickly?
Easy to use. A lot of data that they're looking for. If they're looking for additional data, there's always in the back of in more detail, drilling down to the next level to really detail, but really being relevant. They have information that they're getting that they could actually utilize to increase their business. And, as we talked about, you're going to go see somebody that you've never met. And for you to know, a couple things about them before going in to see them and having a conversation is huge. And these people believe in relationships, so you're giving them a little bit of nugget up front to build that relationship.
Yeah, let me bring that point over to you, Leilani, because we talk a lot when we talk about technology like this. We talk about data, we talk about insights, we talk about the technology itself. But maybe we sometimes forget the kind of front-end user application and how easy it is to use these things, which I guess is quite a big part of getting field forces on board with this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share an anecdote from another customer, and they're the head of a regional manager of a group of customer-facing reps said that when she asked her team for feedback, the best feedback she got was they said everything they had used up to that point was about them searching. They were given tools, but they still had to use those tools to do the searching. And with Zephyr Illuminate, it was just found for them. And so I think a lot of that speaks to these, predictive next best actions. So the work has been done, and the suggestions are coming to you, the recommendations are coming to you. It's not about you using the tool to go find stuff. It's about or search for stuff. It's about it being found for you. And I thought that was a great anecdote.
So basically saying if you do this, we think you'll have more success. We're not saying you have to work out what to do.
Right. Or spending the time. I mean, I will share a very concrete ROI that one of our European customers ran for us, and very similar to Megan's situation, they have a limited sales force. They're not growing their sales force. They don't want to shrink it either, but it's always about how can you do more with less. We've been saying that for 25 years. How do we do more with less? And what they found was, so we sat down and did the ROI with them, and they found that their sales force, if they had to calculate how much time they spent in customer profiling and pre-call planning, that they averaged it out to about 1 day per month per rep. Well, for them, with the number of reps they had, in a 3-year ROI, by them being able to refocus that 1 day per month per rep, they calculated that was an $11 million saving in 3 years for them. Wow. So having their reps focus their time, not on searching, not on looking, not on profiling and pre-call planning and doing all of these again, frequently doing what we're talking about, connecting these disconnected and not necessarily intuitive data sources by doing searches and trying to find these pieces, that being able to focus that time on high-value sales, so being able to, one, prioritize who you go see and making sure it is the right customer, and then knowing more about them, like Megan said, having a much deeper relationship and conversation because you know a lot more about them before you go, that's how they calculated their ROI.
So at a high level, there's a very good example of ROI.
Yes.
Another question that's come in, I want to just hark us back a little bit to your presentation, Leilani. If we cast our minds back, the survey respondents cited cost and availability of data as two key challenges in getting meaningful insights on their customer relationship networks. Do you think that kind of really is the case, or is that maybe a bit of a smokescreen?
Well, I mean, this is, I like to say this is why we're in business, right? It is not, it is absolutely what people cite, but again, I'm gonna give you a customer example. One of our customers had spent over 4 years, and this is in the data and analytics team, over 4 years and over $8 million trying to connect a whole series of disconnected data sources to get to the insights that we're talking about. And as Megan said, that is not their core competency, right? Their core competency is to develop treatments that are making people's lives better and saving lives. And when they came to us, we were able to get just 85 different data sources, the 85 different data sources that they had been looking at connecting, pulled together for them within 90 days so they could start looking at it and deriving the insights. So clearly, yes, it is a problem. And again, that to us was an example of, at the end of the day for that customer, we were able to pull together, we started with the 85 data sources that they had been trying to get together in 4 years, and again, derive insights from. But what we ended up doing over a longer course of time with them is putting together over 360 different data sources. So again, it seems like a Herculean task, but we were able to do it because that's what we do, and the insights that they were able to get were almost immediate. They're field-facing teams, like Megan said. We usually start with a small group, test it out, and then release it to a larger group. They were very enthusiastic about what they were now able to do that previously just had not been available to them.
And if you take that specific example, if you're starting with 85 different data sources, that's not an availability of data challenge. That's a how do we put this all together and make something meaningful of it challenge.
Yes, and I mean, you have to realize that a lot of these data sources, they don't come, in the public realm, they're not coming with some clear identifier that says this is the key, or this is the way that you can link this data to the other 84 data sources, right? So it is a difficult task if companies are trying to do this and they don't have, again, the beauty of something like machine learning or the technology behind it to do it.
Yeah, the challenges of the big data age, as we often forget, it's the big data but the unstructured data age.
Yeah.
Megan, let me bring that back over to you because I'm interested in your reflections on that in terms of where you were before you started trialling this new system and what some of the key challenges were for you. I mean, were cost and availability of data firmly on your mind, or were there other challenges?
So, before this, the system that we adapted, it was really somebody sitting here getting two different data sets, not even a whole lot for us, because every data is very expensive. Its cost becomes a big issue as, more data, we feel that more data is better. So, you buy this data, we had somebody just kind of putting in Excel, sending them out, it still wasn't very good. And did we think that it was working? We don't know. We could never really figure out, and not understanding what the reps were doing with those data was really difficult for us to measure. But with this, what we're doing is not just the data that there's outputting is great, but also we could actually track some of the activities that we have in Salesforce to marry them up and just really show does the relationship between number of activities really drive, the referral. And we're getting very close to putting that together to show as a metrics, and I think the management is very happy with seeing that as a very first cut to say that this is what's working for us.
Very good. Now let's go a little bit onto a different topic here, because an interesting question, and I'm interested in your views on. We've talked very much about this approach, how it works for companies, understanding networks, understanding relationships. Let's just take a look at that from the customer perspective, because in theory, if I'm a customer, it could be quite alarming if somebody comes along and they know everything about me and all my kind of relationships. How have you actually seen that play out? What's been the customer's reaction when you're kind of going in and you're more informed, I guess, than you have been around what they're doing and who they're interacting with? Do you want to comment on that first, Megan?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but your direct customers really do not have a very good idea of who your current referring physicians are. Once you go in and you're having conversation with your stakeholders at the implanting site, and you kind of go through some of this data, giving them the, where the referring physicians are coming from, what their network looks like, it brings a tremendous amount of value to them. So now it's not you just owning your business and trying to grow your business, but now you've really become of value to your customers as well as, building that relationship with the referring physicians. So it's been very positive.
So you're not just telling them what they know, you're telling them what they don't know, but is interesting to know.
Absolutely. They get very excited when they find out that, we have this sort of data and we're actually executing based on the patterns that they have that they don't know about.
Yeah, interesting. Leilani, did you want to pick up on that?
Well, I'm going to take it from a technologist perspective, because that's what I am, not being in the life sciences myself. And again, I think anecdotally, what I would say is every single one of us wants to have relevant information, and physicians are no different. Again, referring physician, treating physician, they're no different. So we all want to be engaged with as consumers of any product through the channels that we prefer, and we want the messaging for us to be personalized and relevant. And I think that really just speaks to the bottom of this evolution of customer engagement has to be data-driven. It has to be about what the customer, in this case the physician, what they care about, what they want to know. And again, frequently that is determined by their relationships, their cohort, right? Their friends, their medical school colleagues, their specialties, but also the subspecialties that they're interested in. So I think these are, again, they're very much consumer-like behaviors that are transforming in a business-to-business world.
And if you stand back, Leilani, because you've got a good sort of field of vision across the life sciences industry, I mean, using approaches like this, it sounds pretty obvious to do. Why would you not want to understand customer networks and the relationships in more detail? But at the same time, I guess we've only recently had the depth of data and the technology to enable companies to do this. So where are companies right now in general? Are most companies starting to use this? Are we still quite early days?
I think we're at an inflection point. I mean, I would say, in particular, and in Megan's, case is a good one, as we've heard from a couple of our other customers. It is no longer enough to try to do this in-house. So unless a pharmaceutical company or a biotechnology company is really building out an entire IT department, I think their analytics teams absolutely are doing great work, but it's no longer enough. They need to now kind of get to that next stage of how do we get beyond what we've been able to do until now and get to that differentiating stage. So I definitely think we're at an inflection point, and there are, as always, early adopters who are moving forward and seeing the benefits of the changing technology and again, how it changes their commercial programs, and others who are coming to the inflection point. So I would say we've hit the inflection point, and now we're at where we're seeing a lot of early adopters.
Yes, I think it could move pretty quick from this stage.
Yes.
And Megan, from your perspective, you mentioned in your presentation that you felt maybe you're a little bit behind in terms of technology, perhaps not your company in the field of life sciences, but maybe life sciences in general. Do you feel in terms of where you are now that you've kind of stolen a bit of a march and you're slightly ahead?
Yeah, and I could just speak for myself, but I know some of the other colleagues out there that I spoke to. IT could be your big obstacle when you're trying to implement a system because they have their protocols and they want to make sure they're doing the right thing, and it becomes, 3 to 6 months, some even up to 12 months in order to implement. And, I could now feel that I'm doing a little bit better than everybody else, even within the organization, as we have many divisions in our organization, is that, we were able to really work outside of our IT to actually implement the system, which became quick implementation that, I was able to deliver to our sales team. So I feel a little bit better.
And well, that's good. That's good to know. And in terms of the sort of senior management, I guess not just within your companies, but as you look across the industry, one of the challenges I sometimes see is there's so much happening in the world of technology and data and all these kind of new approaches. I guess it sometimes can be hard for them to see where are the key areas where it's going to make a difference. So there's a lot of work, for example, on the clinical side, and that will make a difference, but not in the short term. Something like this has a very, I guess, near-term commercial impact. Is that something, when you look at this particular application, this kind of relationship mapping, are you seeing that recognition at the most senior level within companies?
I think they see the needs of something that's going to move the needle, right? At the end of the day, with this sort of complex therapies coming more and more from these bigger organizations like us, is the customers are changing. They really do need some help. And I've actually had a chance to speak to another senior management, or one of our competitors, and they were very interested in looking into this particular system after I spoke about it at a conference. So I know there are interest. I don't know if they feel that they could get the return right away, but we also have to, from the marketing perspective, like the paradigm shift in selling, us marketers also need to really start to shift our mind share to, it's not about just classic marketing messages and, execution, but also incorporating the data analytics to get to a better decisions to move the needle. And I think based on my experience, more and more senior management are seeing the need for this.
Yeah, and I'm keeping, as you're mentioning, sort of return there, I'm keeping an eye on that poll we started earlier. Not so many of you keen to vote on this one. I think you're not quite sure what that timescale is for measuring return on investment, but what we are seeing with this, again, this straw poll is nobody's saying 3 to 5 years or more than 5 years. And I guess that's reflective of the commercial environment we're in. If something's going to deliver a return, it's got to do it reasonably quickly to get buy-in from the senior management.
I'm sorry,
Sorry, Megan, go ahead.
No. Was that a question for me? I'm sorry.
No, it was just an observation on the poll.
Oh, okay.
That, I think the poll is clearly saying that you've got to be able to show there is a return, that there's some, return on the investment within a 2-year time scale, not 3 to 5 years or longer.
Right.
So we're coming up against the hour. Let me sort of finish the discussion with one more area I just want to touch on, because we've talked about, as we saw in the survey, the importance of relationship analytics, understanding networks, how it can be applied. I'm sure there's people listening into this who are maybe not using this and thinking, well, how do we get from where we are now to being able to deploy this kind of technology? So I'm interested to get a view from both of you in terms of, if you're in their shoes, and Megan, you've obviously been there relatively recently, what's the starting point? What do they need to do first? And what are the things to look for as early indicators to show that the new approach is working? Do you want to go with that first, Megan?
Yeah, I think you have to understand clear expectation of what that duration is to see the ROI, and the understanding the data that you need, not a whole lot, but what do you have today? And what does that data look like? And have a conversation with your partner, the business partner you are looking to, to implement, to really marry up everything you have and addition to what they have to get to the optimal level.
And Leilani, what would your thoughts be on that?
Besides giving us a call, I would say, absolutely, we like to suggest to our customers, pick an area and do a pilot, right? Pick an area where we can work together and determine exactly like Megan said, what are the key problems that we can solve together? What are the key challenges you're having? This is a great use case where, again, limited a number of field-facing or even declining number of field-facing employees, and how do you marry personal and non-personal customer engagement? What are the data sources that are going to help you really take that leap into improved customer engagement and sales, because ultimately it really is about the sales and the revenue, and find a starting place to prove out the ROI, and then take it again to other areas in the organization, other disease areas, other treatment areas, again, other departments, but start with one area where, again, either you've got a critical launch or a new indication, something, again, pick the inflection point in your company, an area that needs to change, and there we can start working on, again, what are the game-changing insights going to be.
Thank you, Leilani. And unbelievably, we are up against the hour. We've had a fascinating discussion, but I think there's some good closing thoughts to take us into the end of the webinar. And I think, observations from me, just reflecting on what I've heard, is, we know that change is difficult, particularly within sales and marketing models. I think we've been through the whole conversation in life sciences about what is the role of the rep. Do we need the rep? I think we've come out the other side and we know we do, but it's about smarter reps. And I think understanding these kind of customer networks, understanding their relationships, building the right relationships, for me, is going to be one of the key determinants of success moving forwards. And it's got to be powered by understanding of all the different factors there, not just what you already know. So I want to just finish by really thanking both Leilani and Megan for a fantastic, stimulating discussion. I'm sure there'll be other questions you've got that we haven't got to, so I've put up on the screen now for further information. If you contact info@zephyrhealth.com, we will then respond to any of those further questions. If you haven't already, just a reminder that you can click on attachments and links. There is a link to the full survey covering this area that you can download and peruse at your leisure. So thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Zephyr for being our sponsors today, and we hope to see you next time.